Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm here to walk you through a lab activity in Lens. To get started, we first need to upload a property or add a new property to Lens. To do this, we're going to add a new portfolio, and we're going to use the Draw on the Map option. To get to where our property is, let's use this search bar in the map and search for Height Cove, California, and click on that first option in the drop-down. This will automatically zoom our map to that location. And let's actually zoom out now until we can see both Brown Peak and Trumbull Peak. There they both are. And now let's draw on the map. So select this draw button, and we're going to draw a rectangle on this map. And we want to make sure it encompasses both incline, portal, and all the way down to Brown Peak. Double-click to complete your drawing of your property. Now, no need to get this exactly right, and you can edit this once you've done your first pass at drawing it, but something roughly similar to my shape on the screen here. We can now name our portfolio, so I'm just going to call this Labs for Lens, and then we can name our property as well here. Next, to finalize our property upload, let's review datasets. Now, think about what datasets might be useful for looking at wildfire impacts. You can browse the different layers available here, and you can click on the card to view more information about the layer. We want to find land cover impact observatory data, the 10-meter version, and we'll just click add. And then we also want to find burn index from Sentinel. That'll be at the bottom here. We want the Sentinel option, and we can click add. Now we can exit out of this modal and click confirm to kick off processing of our property. This might take a few minutes for everything to process and upload to Lens, but in about 5 to 10 minutes, you should get an email saying that everything's processed, or you can come back and check Lens. Your property should be done processing when you no longer see a clock icon here after refreshing Lens. Now that our property is ready, let's go into our new portfolio and then click on our property name. By default, when we go into Lens, we see the most recent high-resolution true color imagery here. And so in this case, we're looking at imagery from 2022. We can use our left and right arrow keys to cursor through time. So let's just use our left arrow key on our keyboard to go back through time and see how this property has changed over the last handful of years. We can see in this 2018 image that it looks like we've got some burn scars across the area. Everything looks quite scorched. And if we jump back to 2016, we're no longer seeing that. We see a lot of greenery. If we click this plus button, we can jump into compare mode, so that will let us view two images side by side. And let's do that and switch this image back to 2018 so we can compare now 2016 and 2018. If we use this slider bar, we can see how much this area changed between 2016 and 2018. And then if we want to capture this observation, take this down as a note, we can open up our notes pane, add a note, and you can write whatever you want in your note. I'm going to say that we can see burn scars appearing between 2016 and 2018. Once you've typed in your observation, just click create, and this note will automatically save the layers you were looking at and the property as its location. So you can come back to this and see what you were looking at when you made that note. Now that we've explored this property with true color imagery, we can turn to other types of data to get a better understanding of how this property has changed over recent years. And we can use vegetation data first to do this. And the analysis tool in Lens allows us to view trends over time with different types of data. So click on the analysis button in the left-hand side here, and this opens up our analysis tool. We want to select the whole property, and then we want to make sure that the data set we're analyzing is vegetation. Our chart type is average value, and then make sure time range here reads all time. Once these parameters are set, you can go ahead and click Analyze, and your chart will begin to load. Now you can see a time series of how vegetation has changed on this property over time. And we can see pretty high, steady values through 2017, followed by a big drop in 2018. If you cursor over these drops, you can see the exact date and value associated with each dot. You can also use this button up here, Maximize, to view this in a slightly larger modal. So if we cursor over here, we can see our last high value before this drop occurred on 7/11 in 2018, and then our first drop here is 7/16. So we can assume from this that the fire began in July of 2018. And we can see since the fire, we have a slight upward trend in vegetation in the years since, indicating some amount of revegetation. We can also click on these dots to show that layer on the map here. So if I click on a point before that drop in 2018, that vegetation layer will appear on my map. And then if I hold Shift down on my keyboard and click on a second point after the drop, that will snap me into compare mode so I can view those two images side by side. I can also scroll in here on the map, and that can be helpful when you're trying to click on an exact point to be able to view that a little bit closer. So now these two images, one from before the fire began and one from after, are on my map. I can use the slider again to view that before and after. And I can also add a note capturing my observations here. Once you put your observations in your note, you can click Create to save that note, and then you'll see that your note appears in the Notes pane above the true color note that we just recorded a few minutes ago. Now we can look at even more additional types of data to further bolster what we were seeing with this vegetation data. So let's look at that burn index that we added when we added this property. Let's go back to our analysis tool. Select the entire property again. And now let's make sure the data set here is burn index. We'll keep our chart type as average value and the time range as all time. Click Analyze to start processing that time series graph, and wait for your chart to load. Now on our graph, we can see almost the opposite of what we were seeing with the vegetation graph. Instead of a sharp drop in 2018, we're seeing steadily low values, followed by a sharp increase in 2018. Again, we can scroll to zoom in on this spike, and we can click on a point and shift click on another point to view those two layers on our map in compare mode. So I'll click on this point, and then I'll hold Shift down on my keyboard and press a point after this spike. And now we can see here from before and after the fire how this layer really lights up, showing the amount of fire or recent burn activity. We can also come to the right-hand side of the screen here and click on this 3D button. This allows us to view the topography of the area. We can rotate around to view different angles, and this can really help us see how the topography might have affected the fire. We can see this kind of valley here, how the fire really went through, and how it looks like this ridgeline maybe even acted as a fire break. So this can help give us some additional context. To leave 3D mode, you can just click that same button again. Now, if we want to pinpoint exactly when fire activity in this area began, we can zoom in even further on this spike, and we can see we have flat values here. Maybe the last value before we started spiking is this 711. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to shift click on the first point after that, 716. This allows us to compare those two images. So we can see in 711, we have almost no bright spots indicating fire activity. And then in 716, we can see this area has really lit up. We have these very bright areas that might even indicate active fire. And so this is telling us that likely the fire activity began in this area in this 5-day span between 711 and 716. So we can add a note, capture our observations from looking at the burn index data, and click Create to add that to the notes pane. Now that we've investigated when the fire began, let's assess some of the impacts of the fire. One way we can do this is using land cover data. We'll use the Impact Observatory land cover data as it provides us with annual data back to 2017. Let's go back to the analysis tool one more time during this lab. So click on Analysis. Let's select the entire property again. And now let's change the data set here to land cover. The chart type should be area by category this time, and for time range, we can leave that as all. Click Analyze to start processing the data, and this should load pretty quickly. Here we can see bar graphs for each year showing us the breakdown of different land cover types in this area. And so we can see for 2017, we have 17,000 acres of forest, about 43% of the area was considered trees. Jump to 2019, and that's much lower, down to 10%. Let's click on 2017 and shift click on 2019 to compare those visually side by side. So here we can see in 2017 where we have large areas of trees. In 2019, those have really diminished quite a lot. And by cursoring over here, we can see those exact acre values going from about 17,000 acres of trees before the fire to about 4,000 in the year after. We can also see since the fire from 2019 to 2022, we have a slight increase. So we go from 4,000 acres in 2019 to then we're seeing over 5,000 in 2022. So some initial revegetation may be indicated by that. Let's add a note and save our observations from looking at this land cover data. Looking at the impact observatory data here, we can see that there are some built areas in red here. So we have built areas in red on our property. And let's zoom into some of these and switch to high resolution true color imagery so we can assess if the fire caused any damage to these areas. We have 4 main areas here. Let's zoom into these middle 2. Now you can click this X here to leave compare mode, so you're just viewing one image at a time. And let's switch our layer drop down to high resolution true color. And then make sure your date drop down now shows 2018. We want to look at imagery from after the fire. Now you can zoom in and out and pan, click and drag to pan around to assess how these areas fared from the fire. We can see here that these areas look relatively unharmed, and you can actually see a pretty clear line from where the fire burn scar ends. And now we can even zoom in to see what exactly was acting as this fire break. And it looks like in this instance, it's actually a road here. There's a stream as well, but the road here is really what's acting as that fire break. So now we can add a note to capture these observations. So let's click Add Note. And let's actually make sure we're capturing the exact location we're looking at. So let's click on this Add a Map Area button, and let's just draw a shape around where we were viewing. Again, double click to finish that drawing. Let's add our note. And then click Create to save this note. Now, if you come back or if a colleague comes in and looks at this note, if they click on it, it'll take them to this exact area we were looking at, as well as to this specific image you were looking at. Let's look at some more recent imagery now to see if we can find evidence of revegetation since the fire occurred. So let's go back to compare mode, click the plus sign here, and let's change this 2016 image instead to 2022. So we should be viewing true color imagery from 2018 and 2022. Now you can zoom out and pan around and zoom back in to see different areas in more detail. At large, though, we can see that we go from a pretty burnt, scorched area to a much more green area. If we zoom in, though, we can see some really detailed examples of this. So here we have pretty scorched vegetation. We have some still green vegetation here, but then fast forward to 2022, and we can really see some individual shrubs and vegetation coming back in this area. So let's add another note. Again, we can add a map area to this note to show exactly where we were looking. Add our text and click Create to save this note. So again, if you come back or if another colleague comes in here, we can click on each of these different notes to snap back to that area we were looking at and the layers we were looking at when we saved that note. You should now have 6 notes in your notes pane that tell a story about the timing of the fire, some of the impacts, and some of the recovery since then. Now we can package this all up into a report. So if we go to this little report button at the top of the notes pane, we can click on that, and this will open up a modal for our reports. If you are a Plus or enterprise customer, you should see this feature here to generate a smart summary. So this will automatically summarize the notes in your report and put that on this cover page as your summary. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we can see this text populating, starting to summarize the notes that I took. Now, if we scroll through this report here, we can see a property overview, and then we'll see a page for each of those 6 notes that we took. You can edit this. You can zoom in to change the view of the note here. You can edit the title text of each note. We can hide pages if we don't want to include them in our final version. And so you're welcome to make as many edits here as you want, and then you can either print to save this as a PDF to your computer, or you can save this report to Lens and it will allow you to add a title. I'll click OK. And then this report is saved here in your reports pane, so you can come back to it to keep editing it or to view it again. And you've now completed your first report in Lens telling the story of this wildfire, which means you have successfully completed your first lab in Lens. Congratulations. If you want to keep learning more about Lens, you can head to upstream.tech/Lens. Thank you for doing this lab with us.